All right, guys. I just wanted to take you through um, some things that I've been thinking a lot about recently, in the hopes that maybe it could help someone. I know we've all been going through some very tough times, but I decided to really sit down and break it down to the very basics and actually see what's going on. So I call it yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So I started off with the assumption, what can I be completely sure of in life? I can't be sure of history. I mean, they tell me that happened, but I don't know it for sure. I can't be sure of science either, and I definitely can't be sure of the truth. The only thing I am sure of is today, right now, is true. I'm living today, I am alive. So what does this mean? Well, following on from that, it means that all those who predicted darkness and gloom and a miserable future in the past were wrong. That's a fact. I mean, there were bad moments, but we are still here. It must also mean that those who live in their ivory towers, the academics and statisticians who tried to push the same conclusion, were also wrong. So, in conclusion, today is real. We know that, we can all agree on that. But what about yesterday? Well, yesterday happened in the past. And although it doesn't exist anymore, I know that it happened because I had to pass through it to get to today. So that means the past is useful as a measuring stick. Typically, how different is yesterday from today? Well, I mean, if you watch the news, then today was much worse than last week, and last week was much worse than the week before. But if you spend 2 weeks in the middle of the woods with no news or no media, you'd probably say yesterday looked very much like today, and the day before yesterday looked very much like yesterday. Maybe some changes in weather, but I mean, to the naked eye, not much change. So just remind yourself of the people who stood up and told you yesterday that today wouldn't come. Because you'll see, I mean, as you progress through life, it happens very often. And what about tomorrow? Well, tomorrow is an illusion as well. And the reality is, it might come for some, it might not for others. But since tomorrow has not happened yet, why are people so intent on painting it so bleakly as a tomorrow filled with darkness? Simply because they wear white coats or they hold positions of power, they feel the right, the authority to paint such a picture full of misery? And then I was thinking, well, if I made it through today, they have been preaching this message for hundreds of years, and they have been wrong in the past, which means they were wrong about tomorrow in going back in time. Which means that as long as I have today, as long as I have a dream for tomorrow, my version of tomorrow is just as likely as theirs. So why do they do it? Well, they do it because their goal is to convince enough people to exchange their dream of tomorrow for the bleak version that they have constructed. And inevitably, these people imagine a future so dystopian and destructive, they begin to get very emotional and angry. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it with the climate activists and all the people gluing themselves and destroying versions of art just because of that belief. So what actually happens is that those who sold them this vision utilize the emotions of those who bought in to actually build that future. Because as we established, their future is not a foregone conclusion as long as there are other options on the table. It only becomes a foregone conclusion when everybody buys into it. And those who bought into it become even more emotional when they see that others are simply living their lives. Surely they must see the urgency. And this breeds hatred in their hearts. And it causes a divide between us, which is exactly what they want. Now, hope. Hope is a promise of a better future. And thinking about it, one thing I know is true: as long as there is hope, we're still at the table. And I know this simply because I made it to today, and I cannot prove or disprove that today happened because of the hope that someone held yesterday. And just because of that, I deem hope something that we can never lose. Because when we're surrounded by bleakness and walls that close us in, hope is what allows us to turn our head to the heavens and begin to glimpse the possibility of change. And when we take comfort in the fact that the sky is still the same, we then build courage. And we see that the walls aren't that high anymore. And then we climb over them and see the world was just as it always was. Now this is another part that I've been thinking on questions. We spend so much time trying to answer questions, we don't ever stop to think if we're answering the right question. So for example, arguing which religion is true and which is not is such a waste of life, because we'll only find out the truth after we're dead. Instead of asking, does this belief in religion, is it valid or not? Try asking if it gives my neighbor a little bit of light. Does it provide comfort in times of darkness? If so, it must be as true as your religion. And who are you to deny someone else of that little pleasure in life? Because who knows, when you need it most, it might be that very light that illuminates the dark for you. Now, speaking of the dark, when people preach darkness, they're lying. Darkness does not exist. It cannot exist on its own as a separate condition. Darkness is simply an absence of light. The smallest flame can illuminate the dark, but as long as the flame is burning, darkness has no chance. And they want you in darkness because it's more difficult for you to find the switch to turn on the lights. They want you in darkness because they can convince you of the terrors that lurk there. So always carry light in your heart, even if it's faint. A small flame is enough to find the switch, and once the switch is flipped, their lies evaporate.